She was already inside, not near the garage. Not even waiting at the entrance. No, she was right there, in my garage, behind the wheel, pulling down my mirror like it was a vanity, casually freshening up her lipstick as if she were in some private powder room, and I just stood there, frozen, trying to figure out if I was being punked, or if I'd accidentally wandered into some strange reality where people have forgotten what private property actually means. Spoiler alert, it got worse. Much worse. I'm sharing this now because I need to know, am I the unreasonable one here, or would anyone else have snapped too? Scroll down and let me know in the comments. Be brutally honest. I opened the garage and just stood there, stunned. A black Mercedes sat in my space, and the woman inside was touching up her lipstick like she was sitting in front of her own mirror. Let me set the scene. My garage isn't just for parking. It's my sanctuary, my escape, my physics lab, my workshop, my meticulously organized haven that's taken 5 whole years to perfect. Every tool has its spot. Every project has its zone. Honestly, it's the most peaceful quarter of my life. My name's Leo, 30, single, and a high school physics teacher. Maybe that's where my obsession with order comes from. Or maybe I've just never had much patience for chaos. Either way, this garage is sacred. It represents everything I value about personal space in our quiet, suburban cabin neighborhood. Because when you spend your weekdays dealing with teenagers who treat Newton's laws like suggestions, you need a place that actually makes sense. So imagine this. It's a calm Saturday afternoon. I'm prepping a new physics demo for my Monday class, is something cool involving momentum and energy transfer that I was genuinely excited to try out. I hit the garage door opener, expecting to see my Mercedes, polished and parked exactly where I left it, but what I saw made my jaw hit the floor. The giant white Tesla was smack in the middle of my workspace. And I mean the entire workspace. But here's what really floored me. The woman in the driver's seat, calmly using my rearview mirror to fix her makeup like she was in her own personal glam studio. I literally rubbed my eyes. I thought maybe I was hallucinating. Who does that? Who just pulls into someone else's garage like they own the place? I stared for a good 30 seconds, trying to process whether I'd crossed into some alternate reality where boundaries just don't exist. Look, I'm a logical guy, it comes with the job. So instead of flipping out, I decided to get to the bottom of it. Thankfully, I'm kind of a tech nerd and had installed security cameras a few years ago after a few packages vanished. I pulled up the footage on my phone and there it was, clear as daylight. This woman's short, styled blonde bob, navy blazer that screamed authority figure drove into my garage around noon. She sat there for 3 full minutes, checking her reflection, fluffing her hair, reapplying her lipstick. Then, she calmly got out and walked next door to Mrs. Smith's place like she was strolling through a parking lot. This wasn't an accident, not a misunderstanding, it was deliberate. She even checked her watch and took her sweet time, like my garage was her personal valet service. The level of entitlement was honestly jaw-dropping. Still, trying to be the reasonable adult here, I walked over to Mrs. Smith's door and knocked. Politely. No response. I knocked again. Nothing. I could hear laughter inside, just loud enough to sting. I wasn't asking for much, just for someone to move a car out of my own garage so I could use my space. I kept knocking every few minutes, waited almost 10. All I got back was more muffled conversation and the occasional giggle. In hindsight, maybe I should have shouted through the door. But I was trying to handle things like an adult. That was probably mistake number 1. After an hour, yes, an actual hour, I time to time made a decision. I wasn't going to touch her car or do anything reckless. But I grabbed my heaviest padlock from my tool cabinet and locked the garage door shut. This was still my property. I figured, that's fair, right? In hindsight, maybe I should have called the cops. But what would I have even said? Hello, officer, someone parked in my garage and won't come to the door. So I padlocked the door, then taped a sign right on the outside. Garage locked. Car owner, contact homeowner after your vacation. I thought it was pretty reasonable, maybe even generous given the situation. About 5 minutes later, there was this thunderous pounding on my front door. And I mean, she was hitting it like she was trying to break it down. Open this door right now. Where is my car? Her voice was so sharp it probably sent every neighborhood dog into a panic. I didn't say a word, just let my cameras record every second of the tantrum. Part of me wanted to explain calmly, but I had a pretty strong feeling that wasn't going to help. The pounding got louder, more desperate. She yelled things like, "I know you're in there. This is illegal." Oh, the irony. The woman who illegally parked in my garage was now lecturing me on the law. Then came the big reveal. She identified herself through the door. "This is Francine Vaughn, president of this community's homeowners association." Oh, great. The HOA president herself, mid-40s, always strutting around like she runs a Fortune 500 company, had decided my garage was hers to use. Francine had this aura of authority she weaponized like a badge. Blazers every day. That clipped tone. Always reminding everyone she was in charge. And now, here she was, banging on my door, losing her mind because someone finally didn't bend to her will. That night, something snapped inside me. Maybe it was the adrenaline, or just years of swallowing frustration, but I booked a red-eye to Miami. I'd been putting off a vacation anyway, and suddenly, 1,000 miles of distance sounded perfect. While I packed, part of me second-guessed it. Was I overreacting? Should I just unlock the garage and move on? But then I thought of the footage, how casually she claimed my space, and my resolve hardened. Some people only understand boundaries when they're enforced. I was about to find out if Francine Vaughn was one of those people. As soon as my plane landed in Miami, I shut my phone off completely. Not on silent off. I needed a full reset. Just me, some sunshine, and zero neighborhood drama. And for a while, it worked. Coconut water on South Beach, sun, quiet, freedom. It felt like the stress just dissolved in the waves. Dolphins leaping out in the distance while Francine, back home, probably plotted my downfall. But the peace didn't last long. On day 3, Lisa found me. Lisa's my neighbor, 28, sharp as a tack, and a freelance graphic designer. She notices everything. She lives next to Mrs. Smith and had always kind of been a quiet ally, especially when it came to HOA nonsense. Her message lit up my phone. "Dude, Francine called the cops. Told them you kidnapped her car. She's also stirring things up in the private group chat, anonymous posts trying to make you look like a villain." I laughed out loud. Kidnapped her car? That was her spin. I ordered another penis COLADA. Lisa kept me updated. Things got crazier. Police, private investigator, neighborhood gossip, all of it. She went nuclear. The cops actually came by my house, knocked, and told Francine it was a civil matter. "Ma'am, we can't break into someone's garage over a parking spot. You'll have to go through proper channels," Lisa said. Francine looked stunned. Like she expected a SWAT team to bust down my door. Instead, they told her to call a lawyer. Then things really went off the rails. Francine hired a private investigator to track me down, in Florida, over a garage lock. It was wild. But honestly, I wasn't surprised. Francine acts like the HOA is her personal monarchy and any challenge to her rule is treason. Still, the dedication was something. Luckily, I'm private by nature, comes with being a teacher. I don't share locations. I'd already changed hotels twice and never posted anything online about where I was. But my phone, it was blowing up. On day 4, I checked it briefly. 52 missed calls. 28 emails, each one more desperate than the last. At first, the emails were formal. "This is unlawful. You'll face consequences." Then, they shifted. "Please return the car." Just that, pleading, like watching a meltdown in slow motion through text. She went from authoritative to unhinged, one email at a time. "You're legally obligated to return my car right now or deal with serious repercussions." Then the tone shifted. Her messages became more frantic, more personal. "I have critical appointments, and you're actively interfering with my daily responsibilities. You're making it impossible for me to fulfill my obligations to the community." By the time her 25th email arrived, she was practically pleading. The desperation bled through every word, even in plain text. But what really got under my skin, she didn't stop at emails. She turned it into a full-blown digital smear campaign via our neighborhood's private group chat. Lisa sent me a few of the anonymous posts, undeniably Francine's handiwork, despite her attempt to stay anonymous. Things like, "Anyone else notice how certain neighbors believe they're above the rules or common courtesy?" And, "It's disheartening when people use their property to damage the community spirit we've worked so hard to build." It was textbook manipulation. Almost impressive, really like performance art. she was trying to rally the entire neighborhood against me without ever saying my name. Her hope that peer pressure would break me. The posts kept coming, each one more frantic and unhinged than the last. Reading them felt like watching someone spiral from afar. Honestly, it was surreal. It crossed my mind to just disappear for a while. But if I did that, she'd be the one writing my narrative. The weather was perfect. My stress had evaporated. I remembered what it felt like to live without constantly walking on eggshells. I was finally sleeping well, enjoying great meals, meeting fascinating people, and for the first time in ages, truly savoring life. It was the kind of escape that makes you question the whole idea of going back. Still, I knew deep down that staying away too long would just make me the villain in her version of events. If I didn't return and confront this, Francine would have a field day convincing everyone I was some unhinged car thief fleeing state lines. So, instead of ending my vacation early like she probably hoped, I extended it by 2 more days. Let her keep digging. Let her continue sending unhinged emails and dramatic group posts. Each one only made her unravel further. And I was collecting everything: screenshots, timestamps. My inner physics teacher kicked in. I approached it like an experiment. Hypothesis: give Francine enough rope and she hang herself. So far, the data was supporting my theory. Flying back into my home airport felt disorienting, like I'd just returned from an alternate reality. I'd only been gone a week, but it felt like a lifetime. On the drive home, I kept imagining what might be waiting for me. A mob of angry neighbors, Francine breaking into my garage. Police, lawyers, reporters. Who knew? Whatever it was, I was ready to handle it with the same calm I'd found on the beaches of Miami. My tan was already fading, but the clarity I'd gained felt permanent. Sometimes you need distance to get perspective. I paused before pulling in, relishing the moment of peace. There's something deeply satisfying about restoring order to your own space. I hit the garage opener slowly, aware that my security cameras were recording the moment. Everything was just as I'd left it, my tools in place, my workbench spotless, my little haven untouched. For the first time in over a week, I felt equilibrium return, like the universe had snapped back into alignment. That tranquility lasted exactly 3 minutes. I barely had time to step out of my car before I heard the sharp staccato of high heels on pavement. Francine appeared at the edge of my driveway like some kind of suburban wrath goddess. Her face was flushed crimson, fueled by sleepless nights and raw fury. Her flawless blonde bob was frizzed at the edges, and her navy blazer looked like it hadn't left her body in days. "How dare you do this to me?" she screamed before I could shut my door, her voice slicing the air with the force of a siren. "I run this neighborhood, and I will not be disrespected." Years of managing classroom meltdowns had prepped me for exactly this. I wanted to meet her fire with fire, but instead, I kept my voice even and firm. "You don't have any authority over what happens in my private garage," I said, staying measured. That set her off. It was like I had defied gravity in her carefully constructed universe. She launched into a tirade about property rights and community expectations, flailing her arms, as if conducting an invisible orchestra of outrage. "This is a community, Leo. We have standards. You can't just do whatever you want without thinking about the consequences for others." The irony nearly made me laugh. Here she was, preaching about respect and community, after she'd illegally parked in my garage and then hired a pied to tail me when I stood up for myself. The lack of self-awareness was stunning. The exchange, if shouting counts as dialogue, quickly morphed into a legal showdown. Francine, with all the confidence of someone holding a royal flush, pulled out her title as HOA president like it was an unbeatable card. "As president of the Homeowners Association, I have rights you clearly don't understand. There are protocols, procedures." I pointed to the large, clearly visible "no trespassing" sign that had been on my property for 3 years. "This is private property, Francine, not communal space. You had no right to park here, and you know it." The look on her face when I said that it was like someone realizing their ace was actually a joker. That's when she hit me with her ultimatum. It was so chillingly calculated that it genuinely startled me. A public apology, $500, and total compliance receipts too. Her tone was so cold, so clinical, it gave me goosebumps. This wasn't a neighbor anymore. This was someone who had spent a week engineering the destruction of my reputation. It was terrifying how much thought she'd put into it. But the thing about being a teacher, you get good at spotting manipulation. Teenagers use these tactics all the time. And when adults do it, they're just as obvious if you know the signs. I pulled out my phone right in front of her and hit record. "Go ahead and sue Francine," I said, voice calm despite the adrenaline racing through me. "I have thorough documentation of your trespassing. I'm confident any judge will see this for what it is." The shock on her face was priceless. She hadn't anticipated that. It hit her immediately. Her words were now evidence. She turned on her heel and stormed off, shouting that I'd regret this day forever and that I had no idea what kind of lesson she was about to teach me. As I watched her storm away, I couldn't help but wonder, had I just won, or had I walked right into her trap? Her language, the tone, the strategic timing, it felt like she had more planned. And 2 days later, my phone rang, confirming that gut feeling. It was one of the HOA board members. His voice said it all. "Hey, Leo, did I hear right you locked someone's car in your garage?" Just like that, I knew. Francine got to him first. She'd spun a polished version of the story, painting herself as the victim of a neighbor gone rogue. I explained the situation. I had video proof. But I could tell he'd already chosen sides. That's when it hit me, this wasn't just a personal grudge anymore. Francine was running a full-blown disinformation campaign, weaponizing community politics to ruin me. Less than 24 hours later, I received the dreaded email from the HOA board. The subject line made my stomach drop: emergency meeting, resident conduct impacting community harmony. I'd only ever seen meetings like that called for serious crises, floods, fires, property damage. But apparently, locking my garage had sparked a full-blown emergency. The wording made it clear I was the target, and the board expected a very specific outcome. Francine had framed herself as the wrong party and me as the neighborhood menace. That's when I realized I couldn't go up against her alone, not when she had positions of power and friends in high places. I called Bob, 3 houses down, retired principal, one of the few sane voices around here. Bob reminded me of the mentor teachers I'd always respected: calm, fair, experienced. When I told him the whole story, his reaction was unexpectedly intense. 2 inches of grass, Leo. That's all it took, he muttered. Cost me $200. I measured it myself, completely within regulation. She still fined me or threatened lien on my house. When I attempted to contest it, she made the entire ordeal so overwhelmingly procedural and intimidating that I ended up just paying it off, anything to put an end to the harassment. Sarah, my neighbor from across the street, had an even more infuriating experience when I reached out to her for backup. At 40, Sarah worked full-time as a registered nurse at the nearby hospital, handling long hours and making life-or-death decisions daily. The last thing she needed was a neighborhood scandal about house paint. "They made me repaint my place because it was too cheerful," she told me, frustration still raw in her voice even months later. "I had it approved 2 years ago." According to Sarah, the architectural committee had signed off on the color back then. But now, Francine claimed that community standards had evolved, and past approvals no longer held weight. Evolved as if we were talking about scientific advancement, not paint tones. When Sarah pointed out that at least 3 other houses had similar shades, Francine simply said those homes would be handled in due time. It was clearly retaliation, payback for Sarah questioning her in a previous meeting. That's when Bob, Sarah, and I began meeting regularly, comparing notes and documenting the consistent pattern of Francine's behavior over recent years. What we uncovered was staggering. It showed an unmistakable abuse of authority. Francine had clear favorites. If she liked you, you were safe. If not, prepare for fines, threats, and humiliation. People who attended her monthly socials, praised her garden, and generally played sycophant got away with infractions that would cost anyone else hundreds. On the other hand, residents who dared to challenge her decisions or failed to show appropriate appreciation soon found themselves under a microscope, suddenly scrutinized for mailbox positioning, lawn upkeep, and holiday decorations, all enforced inconsistently throughout the neighborhood. We also learned that Francine had been placing friendly calls to neighbors, subtly coercing them to side with her in the upcoming meeting. Lisa overheard her schmoozing Mrs. Peterson. Community unity, she called it, code for choose the right side. It was psychological warfare masked as neighborly concern. meant to scare people into compliance, afraid they'd be labeled as troublemakers if they didn't support her version of events. It was classic emotional manipulation and, unfortunately, it worked on some of our more conflict-averse neighbors, the ones who just wanted everything to quiet down. I spent hours that week combing through our HOA bylaws and found something that could tip the scales. According to the official rules, emergency meetings could only be convened for situations that presented immediate physical or financial risks to the community. A parking disagreement didn't meet that threshold in any reasonable interpretation. I also uncovered multiple instances from the past year where Francine had broken her own procedural rules, failing to give proper notice, denying adequate time for residents to respond to allegations, and making unilateral decisions without full board votes. Lisa, with her graphic design skills and eagle eye for detail, helped me organize all this material into a professional, polished presentation that would be impossible to brush aside. That night, I printed flyers, just the facts, screenshots, testimonies, and direct quotes from the bylaws. Before the sun came up, I quietly slipped one into every mailbox in the neighborhood. As we were finalizing the slideshow, Lisa squinted at the footer of one of Francine's violation notices. "White," she said, zooming in on the fine print. It read, "Civic West Legal Resource, Internal Use Only." "What's Civic West?" I asked. "A legal consulting group some HOAs use," she said. "I've heard of them. They're more aggressive than legal. They teach board members how to weaponize the code." A quick search confirmed it. Civic West wasn't just supplying template documents. They were actually being sued for crafting enforcement tactics that forced homeowners into foreclosure or pressured them into selling. Francine hadn't written those citations, she was executing a strategy. "She's not just power-hungry," I muttered. "She's part of a much bigger system." We included everything: footage of her contradictory rulings, images proving selective enforcement, statements from Sarah and Bob about their own encounters. I felt like a rebel distributing forbidden leaflets, but someone had to show people what was really going on. The flyers were plain, factual, and damning. By sunrise, the whole neighborhood would know what their HOA president had really been up to. That evening, I received the official agenda for the upcoming meeting. Reading it felt like preparing for the most significant confrontation of my adult life. My attendance was mandatory to address violations of community standards and neighborly conduct that disrupted harmony and created unnecessary conflict. The wording lit a fire in me, a mix of indignation, resolve, and, oddly enough, a bit of anticipation. Was this going to be my big vindication? Or a total crash and burn in front of my entire neighborhood? Either way, I was finished staying silent while others wrote the story of my life. If Francine wanted to bring this into the public arena, I'd meet her there with witnesses, receipts, and a catalog of her own misconduct. 45 people packed into a room meant for 20. Judgment Day. The energy was electric. Everyone knew they were about to witness either my triumph or my total public unraveling. You could feel the tension buzzing in the air as neighbors whispered and subtly aligned themselves before things even kicked off. Francine sat confidently at the head table in her crisply pressed navy blazer, every bit the composed community leader. Her expression tight smile, poised demeanor broadcast certainty. She clearly believed she was about to destroy me in front of every person I'd still have to share sidewalks and block parties with. The board chair called the meeting to order, and Francine wasted no time launching what could only be described as a prosecutorial masterpiece. Gone were the shouting matches from my driveway. In their place was a calm, assertive voice accusing me of theft, emotional abuse, and disturbing the peace of the neighborhood. Her words dripped with moral authority. His actions weren't just inconsiderate, she declared. They bordered on criminal and directly threatened the harmony we've all worked so hard to create. To hear her tell it, I wasn't a guy securing my garage, I was some kind of neighborhood saboteur. But when it came time to respond, I played the video. Her face appeared on screen, perfectly framed in my mirror, as she touched up her lipstick. The security footage was crystal clear and devastating. Francine, calmly pulling into my garage, casually checking her watch, adjusting her hair, and freshening up her lipstick before strolling over to Mrs. Smith's house. No panic, no urgency. Just a social call. The room shifted. You could hear the gasps. I flipped the narrative. "This is deliberate trespassing," I said, pointing to the clearly visible no trespassing signs in the footage. There was no emergency, no mistake. Just someone using my private property like it was her personal parking spot. But things quickly got more complicated, in the strange political way that neighborhood issues often do. Roughly half the room nodded along, particularly Bob and Sarah, who lit up when I brought up abuse of power and unfair enforcement. They had clearly been waiting for someone to stand up to Francine's authoritarian tendencies. Yet, Francine's loyalists held firm, those who either benefited from her favoritism or feared becoming her next target. Some longtime residents stood up, defending her leadership and questioning whether my reaction had been excessive. They tried to frame her actions as a simple misunderstanding that could have been handled with a neighborly chat. The debate grew louder as, for the first time in years, people openly picked sides. Then Bob stood up. "I've had enough," he said. "Leo's the only one who's ever helped me trim my hedges, not fine me for it." His voice rang with the quiet authority of someone who'd spent decades managing high-pressure situations. "This woman has ruled this neighborhood with fear for years. We've all been too polite or too scared to speak up. Well, I'm done being scared." Leo acted exactly as anyone should when someone trespasses on their property. The room fell dead silent. Bob's support mattered a lot. You could see the shift in people's expressions. Those who'd been unsure now clearly were rethinking their stance. And then she cried, just one tear. She claimed her mother was in the hospital, her husband unemployed, her entire world falling apart. The mood in the room shifted again. Logic evaporated. Emotion surged. In a soft, trembling voice that somehow filled the whole space, she said, "I made a mistake, and I understand why Leo's upset. But I never imagined he'd be so harsh. Not during the darkest time in my family's life. It was masterful emotional theater so expertly executed it almost felt like performance art. For a second, even I doubted myself. Was I the villain? Here, everyone went quiet. I felt a pit forming in my gut because I recognized exactly what was happening. She was leveraging real or fabricated hardship to twist the narrative, casting herself as a victim and me as the heartless aggressor who kicked her when she was already down. That single tear, whether real or staged, outweighed all the video evidence and testimony I had. Faces around the room changed, skepticism replaced by sympathy, and I could feel the tide slipping away from me. One woman stood up. "We all have rough days," she said. Another nodded. "Let's just move on." A few others murmured in agreement. And just like that, my carefully prepared to unravel facts were losing to feelings. The board chairman looked ready to close the issue with a mild warning to both of us, treating my legitimate concerns and her calculated harassment as equal offenses. I knew this was it, my last shot at stopping her from rewriting the truth and slipping away without facing the consequences of her actions. Surely truth had to outweigh a good performance, right? Just before I stood up to give my final statement, Lisa leaned over, tapped her phone, and whispered, "There's more." She held up a document, a Civic West contract. But the name at the top wasn't Francine's. "Aaron Keller," Lisa said, "regional field strategist. He authorized every enforcement action this year." I blinked, confused. "He doesn't even live here," she added. "He's corporate." "So Francine's not the mastermind," I murmured. "She's just the execution." "Exactly. Keller sets the direction." I took a slow breath, letting my eyes sweep the crowd, one fight at a time. Then I stood. My voice trembled. "Before you vote, there's something you need to hear." Every head turned, every eye focused on me. And honestly, I didn't know if what I was about to play would clear my name or blow up everything I'd worked for. But I knew one thing: I couldn't let her win by using tears and manipulation. The truth had to matter more than performance. And now, I was going to find out if my neighbors cared more about reality than emotion. My hands were steadier than I expected as I connected my phone to the center speaker system. The room fell so silent, you could have heard a pin drop. "I take no pleasure in what you're about to hear," I said, locking eyes with Francine, who'd turned noticeably pale beneath her flawless makeup. "But I can't and won't let the truth be twisted by a performance, no matter how convincing it may seem." I started with more security footage. This clip showed the exact moment Francine parked in my garage, and it completely contradicted her story about rushing to the hospital for her mother's heart attack. She'd parked at 12:15 p.m. on a Saturday, then spent 3 minutes fixing her makeup in my mirror before strolling over to Mrs. Smith's place. Clearly a casual visit, not an emergency. For a moment, I wondered, what if the audio isn't loud enough? What if no one believes me? But then came the real shocker, the outdoor audio recording from my security system. The sound was sharp, unmistakable, and there was no doubt who was speaking or what was being said. Francine's voice rang out, smug, unashamed, talking to Mrs. Smith like a queen mocking a servant. I parked in his garage on purpose. Wanted to teach him a lesson, she declared with icy confidence. If he won't participate in HOA stuff and support events like everyone else, then he shouldn't expect to live here in peace, should he? Bet he's freaking out trying to figure out how to get his car back. Maybe now he'll show some respect. To community leadership. A ripple moved through the room. Chairs shifted. Mouths hung open. Whispers burst like wind in the trees. It was the sound of 45 people realizing, all at once, that they'd been lied to. Francine's face drained of color. Then came the first phase, denial. That's out of context, she stammered, voice cracking. He set me up. That recording is illegal. This is entrapment, a breach of privacy. But Bob's voice cut through like a gavel. Those cameras are on his property. This meeting is over. Her panic was becoming visible. The carefully polished image she'd worn for years began to crack in real time. Then came deflection. You people don't understand everything I've done for this community, she insisted, her voice rising. The sacrifices I've made to keep our property values high. Her composed HOA president mask was unraveling fast. So I played the rest, the documentation I had gathered during my trip to Florida, while she had her very public meltdown back home. Time-stamped photos of her leaving garbage bags at my door at 2 a.m., pulling up plants from my herb garden, scratching my mailbox with her keys, clear acts of vandalism. This is what community leadership looks like under Francine, I asked, and I couldn't quite keep the sarcasm out of my tone. Then came the final stage, breakdown. You're all ungrateful, she screamed, the fake tears vanishing in an instant. Her soft-spoken act disappeared. What remained was raw fury and panic, the rage of someone fully exposed. She ranted about residents not appreciating her, not understanding what it takes to keep the neighborhood respectable. But the mask was gone now. Everyone could see who she really was, a controlling manipulator who treated our community like her private kingdom and anyone who questioned her like rebellious subjects to be punished. The board chair didn't hesitate. In light of the overwhelming evidence, including harassment, property damage, abuse of authority, and dishonesty, Francine Vaughn is removed as HOA president, effective immediately, he said, his tone firm, final. He added that the board would review all fines and decisions made during her leadership, with potential reversals and compensation. Then Sarah stood, placed her hand on Lisa's shoulder, and said, she speaks for us now. It was a small gesture, but one that said everything. The power had shifted. Lisa was unanimously nominated as interim president right there on the spot. Mrs. Allen, silent for 5 years of meetings, finally spoke. She made me repaint my shutters 3 times. I still owe money. And just like that, the dam burst. Years of frustration spilled out. Neighbors who'd stayed quiet now found their voices. One by one, they shared their own experiences, selective enforcement, petty retaliation, arbitrary fines. Lisa's first motion as president. A full audit of every violation issued under Francine's rule, looking not for rules broken, but for justice long denied. Sarah cried. Real tears, not like Francine's. Tears of relief. Justice. Finally, Francine gathered her things with shaking hands, stumbling out of the room like someone in shock, humiliated and stripped of power. Watching her leave, I felt a strange mix of victory, and maybe even a flicker of pity. But then I remembered her words on the recording, how she intentionally tried to punish me for not bowing to her authority. That flicker vanished. The next morning, I stood in my garage, looking at my black Mercedes, back where it belonged. My tools were neatly arranged. The bench was clear and ready for work. After what felt like the longest week of my life, my little sanctuary was finally mine again. But it wasn't just about the garage. It was about standing up for what was right, about seeing real justice win out in a world where manipulators so often come out on top. I wasn't proud, but I wasn't sorry. Maybe this is what justice feels like. Our neighborhood changed overnight. The silence was eerie, almost like the air itself was adjusting to a new peace. Francine became a ghost. Literally, people crossed the street when they saw her. No one returned her calls. She, once the queen bee of every event, now ate dinner alone. Even her pristine home began to show wear, weeds, fading paint, the little signs of someone who'd given up trying. She tried every legal move she could think of. Lisa told me Francine met with 3 different lawyers, hoping to sue me for illegal recording, emotional distress, and humiliation. None of them took the case. Apparently, recording someone trespassing on your property while they admit to harassment isn't exactly a legal gray area. She also begged the board to reverse their decision, claiming she was emotionally unwell during the meeting. But with more neighbors stepping forward with their own stories, that plea went nowhere. Then came the healing. Under Lisa's leadership, the HOA became something it had never been: fair, functional, and community-focused. She led meetings from the same seat Francine used to rule from, but now the room felt warmer, more open. Residents could now vote on rules instead of being handed edicts. Bob started weekend coffee chats at the center. Sarah launched a shared garden project. People were connecting again, not just as homeowners, but as neighbors. Lisa's team did a full audit of every fine issued under Francine's tenure. What they found was worse than we thought: clear patterns of bias, favoritism, and personal grudges disguised as regulations. The board voted to refund thousands in unfair fines. Sarah got back her $3,000. Bob was reimbursed for his grass fine. Dozens of neighbors were compensated for the years they'd endured under Francine's thumb. 6 weeks later, I was working in the garage when I saw a for sale sign go up in Francine's yard. Lisa said she was listing at 15% under market. The social isolation had finally become too much. She couldn't walk to her mailbox without seeing the judgment in people's eyes. Her facade had shattered, and everyone knew it. On moving day, I stood in my doorway watching her load boxes into a truck. She wore a hoodie instead of her usual blazer. She looked smaller, almost ordinary. I thought for a second about walking over, maybe to say something, maybe to find closure, but I didn't. Some lessons are better learned without words. As the truck turned the corner and disappeared, I didn't feel joy or triumph. I felt something deeper. Justice. Real, earned justice, the kind that comes from doing the hard thing, even when you're unsure. 3 weeks later, the phone rang. Hi, this is Janet Morrison, HOA president at Willowbrook Estates, the voice said. We heard about what happened with Francine Vaughn. She applied here, claiming great leadership credentials, but after verifying her background, well, thank you, we dodged a bullet. That's when I realized I hadn't won because I was cleverer or louder. I won because I understood something about bullies. They depend on silence, on people backing down, on fear. But when you start keeping receipts, documenting their words, and refusing to be pushed around, their power melts away. If you've ever stood at your own door, heart pounding, wondering if it's time to fight back, this is your reminder. You're not alone. And you don't have to stay silent. Maybe that's what stayed with me most. No shouting, no final word, just walking away. Door locked, done. If this story meant something to you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment, I read them all. And if you want to support this kind of story, there's a little thank you button down there. Appreciate you hanging out. See you in the next one.